Welcome to the Capitol Notebook. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, the New York State Assembly's Minority Leader, Assemblyman Brian Kolb. And we want to thank you folks all across New York State for joining us for our program today. Assemblyman Kolb, nice to see you. It's the start of the 2019 legislative session. This is a session unlike any other. It's different. This one's different this year, and there's a saying that's pretty popular right now that elections have consequences, and I think New York State is now seeing that come to fruition.
Well, that's for sure. So first of all, I want to say Happy New Year to you and to all of our viewers across New York State and to all New Yorkers. Having said that, yes, I am now using the phrase, you get what you vote for, and that's certainly the case with the governor. In an all-Democrat-controlled legislature, no real checks and balances, on at least from a vote perspective. Certainly, being in the minority, we're always outspoken. We will introduce amendments, which are an internal sort of thing to try to make a point on public policy debates, and we'll cast our votes accordingly. But certainly, we can't give up the fight, and that's exactly what our job is to do, is to point out things that need to be better.
And that's the thing that is different this year, is that for decades, Republicans controlled the New York State Senate. So you had Republicans in control of the Senate, Democrats in control of the Assembly, and now with Democrats controlling both houses, they seem almost giddy with excitement, giddy with power, and they are turning to an agenda at the beginning of the session, which is usually kind of a slow startup time, and bringing forward some pretty high, potent debate type legislation that they want to get going.
Well, and part of it is it's really politically driven, a political agenda, more so than an agenda that I think the average New Yorker is concerned about when they talk about, the cost of living in New York State, whether it's high cost of taxes, property taxes, the regulatory environment for businesses, the nanny state approach that Governor Cuomo is exhibiting and has exhibited, as he wants to control everything. So it's really, I think it's going to take a little while for voters to realize and kind of look around and say, what have we done? And I don't think it's a good move for our state. And I think already the priorities that the Democrats in control are focusing in on are political platforms. They label them progressive. I label them very liberal. I think they're not necessarily in sync with the average New Yorker and what they care about. And that's what we'll continue to talk about, is what the average New Yorker, the people that get up and go to work and school every day and raise their families, those are the folks that we're trying to pay attention to.
Was certainly no surprise to you. You acknowledged that this was all going to be happening in your opening remarks on the first day of the legislative session. You stood up and you said some things, and in particular, it seemed to me like you were driving home why this wasn't going to work out, and that New York State was going to be focused, apparently, this year on the things that don't really matter so much to the people that you and you represent, and a lot of other people across this state. So let's take a look at a small bit of a rather dire picture you presented on the floor of the Assembly about where New York State is right now, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more with Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb.
We lead the nation in outmigration. More than 1 million people have left our state in the last 10 years. I guarantee the people leaving for other states is not exclusive to one political party, and it certainly is not the weather. Reversing this alarming trend should be among our highest priorities. I know there's a robust agenda ahead, and we will disagree on many issues, but we need to seek and try to work together to find common ground. As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, as there's lots of issues that will be forthcoming, we're 48th in the business tax climate. We're the second worst in debt burden. We're the 47th for property taxes. We're the 48th in business friendliness, which is not good. We're 50th in Tax Freedom Day. We're the 6th worst state for condition of our infrastructure. We're ranked the worst state to retire in. We have the highest per pupil school spending, the second most costly Medicaid program in the country. We've ranked 50th for the highest child care costs, and of course, the outmigration of millions of residents that we need to reverse.
48th in this, the 50th in that, the worst, the last. And yet, what we're seeing at the beginning of this legislative session is bills having to do with voting in the state and transgender rights and abortion and the DREAM Act, things like that, which really don't speak to any of the things that you put out there as what's important to you.
Well, it's really what's important, I think, not just to myself, but really to, I think, over 19 million New Yorkers. I mean, when you even look at a regional perspective, when you look at New York City or the Metropolitan Transportation Authority region, which is down-centric around New York City, all the subways that are a mess, have been a mess. A lot of finger-pointing by the governor and putting his hands up, oh, it's not my problem, yet he appoints the majority of the people on the board. Certainly when you talk to those New Yorkers, I don't think things are in such great shape, and they think that that should be the priority. When you talk to local elected officials and the governor's talking about taking away state funding to help them balance their local budgets without raising taxes, that's what people care about at the local level. High cost of property taxes, even with the tax cap, we've done nothing really to substantially reduce the cost drivers, those that require taxes to pay for, to do what we can to reduce those costs to help local taxpayers. And those are things that we want to continue to talk about. And the economy. We've lost over 1 million people since 2010 that have literally moved out of New York State. That's why we're dropping in terms of the size of state population across the country. I think we're now down to number 4. We're going to probably lose at least 1 or 2 more congressional seats at the next census because of our population stagnation. And this is all due to economic policies that aren't working. And clearly people don't want to live in this state, and they're not moving in droves, and they're actually moving out, and it has nothing to do with the weather.
And you sit in a unique position among the legislative leaders and the governor. Of the 5 of you, the governor, the 2 leaders in the Senate, and the 2 leaders in the Assembly, you're the only one that represents upstate New York.
That is correct. And also, I'm the only one with any business background. I've owned my own business with my partners. I've worked from startups. I've been an entrepreneur to small, mid-size, and large international billion-dollar organizations. So I have more of a business background, and I think more of a good understanding of what an economy should look like versus the people that are making the decisions, especially in the governor's office.
It wasn't all that long ago. I remember hearing someone once famously saying, "It's all about the economy, stupid," right? And that was a Democratic president's campaign that was saying that. So with that said, and what you just said about the importance of taxing in the state and how the state spends and how that affects the economy of the state, it seems like bills about dreamers and abortion and the things that the legislature's taking up, these social issues, they're not playing.
Well, I don't think they're playing, and I think this is why it's going to take a little while for the public opinion to catch up with sending messages to Albany, to the governor, and to the Democrat majorities that this is not what we're looking for. And so, we still got a long session to get through yet between now and July. And so we'll see. So far, both Democrat legislative leaders say we're not going to forget upstate. Well, in my view, so far they've done nothing for upstate from that perspective. And so this is why we have to keep talking about it, keep raising the issues. And I always stress, this isn't about politics, this is about public policy. And that's what our focus is is to talk about these issues, because that's what we care about, is public policy and how it affects state government, how it affects every New Yorker's life, whether it's their family life, their personal life, and their business.
The state budget, which the governor has recently handed his budget proposal to the legislature, looks a heck of a lot bigger this year than it has in past years. It looks like there's a heck of a lot more spending going on. People will tell you that if you want to have a big progressive social type agenda, you got to figure out a way to pay for it. Is that what that's all about? And is the state going to be able to comfortably deal with that?
Well, that's why we're going to see what the 2 legislative majority say in response to the governor's budget. And then there's some accounting gimmicks that go on that the governor is really showing. He says he's holding spending growth, near 2%, but what he shifts off budget doesn't get counted against that spending percentage. So if you really take away the accounting gimmicks, we are exceeding the 2% spending cap. And but this is part of the shell game that goes on with Governor Cuomo and his budget people. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how the two majorities respond after we get through the budget hearings, which have just started this past week in Albany.
Let's take one of those issues that's come up this year, the DREAM Act, and look at that for a second, because that's going to have an impact budget-wise on the state. This is a bill that offers free college tuition to children of illegal aliens in New York State. One of the things your conference brought up during the debate on the floor of the Assembly is there's a lot of questions about the language of the bill, in that maybe the parents of the children don't even need to live in New York State, and the children don't need, and there's really no need to establish a citizenry in New York State. Yet New York State's offering free tuition at any state school.
Well, this is part of the problem, and quite frankly, that's why we point these things out on debate. They mislead the public about what the bill does, and quite frankly, we're not helping people that actually are citizens, law-abiding citizens in our state, that struggle to pay their college bills, and they're not having any handouts coming to them. And several years ago, we took away tuition assistance for graduate students, and they're still left in the cold. Yet we're helping children of undocumented immigrants in the state, and I just think that's a wrong priority. And that's really it really is a philosophical difference about what priorities should be. And I think, again, if you ask the average tax-paying New Yorker, the average New York citizen, they will tell you that this is not on their priority list.
And yet you see this debate, in a different form being waged in Washington right now. And if you take that stand against that kind of program, well, you're a racist. Right? I mean, that's the kind of way debates seem to go around Albany and Washington these days.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, actually, just in general. Tom Brokaw made some comments regarding Mexican immigrants and speaking the language, and all of a sudden he was labeled racist. And I'm going, I don't think Tom Brokaw is really a racist. And what happened to our First Amendment, which is free speech? You may not like someone's speech, but our Constitution, Bill of Rights, clearly says we have the ability to have free speech, unless you're trying to, yell fire in a packed movie theater. And I think people have all of a sudden lost this ability to speak freely without getting criticized.
Well, it's a different world here at the state capitol this year. It's going to be interesting for us to sit down and look at what is moving in terms of legislation at the state capitol, and what Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb thinks about it. Thanks for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
If you folks want to reach out to Assemblyman Kolb, easy thing for you to do. You can contact him at his office in Albany. You can drop an email too. We'll hope you'll do that, and we'll see you soon for our next edition of the Capitol Notebook.